Alana walked into the shining lights of a luxury restaurant with her husband Kunnel, her heart steady but her mind distracted. The air smelled of expensive wine, polished cutlery sparkled, and the sound of laughter floated around them. She thought it was just a normal dinner, yet something in Kunnel's smile felt strange. They sat down and almost at once Kunnel stood, pulling a small box from his pocket. He did not turn to Alana. Instead, he walked across the room to another woman, dressed in a bright gown, and everyone gasped. Right in the middle of the crowd, he knelt on one knee, holding the box high. Murmurs rose as the other woman covered her face, pretending to be shy, and Alana sat frozen, unable to believe the man she trusted was humiliating her so openly. As the crowd whispered, a waiter stepped forward carrying another velvet box. He did not walk toward Kunnel, or the woman waiting for a ring. Instead, he went straight to Alana, bowing as though she were royalty. Confused, she reached out and took the box with trembling hands. The room grew silent, every eye fixed on her. She opened it slowly, expecting another cruel trick, but inside was not jewelry. Instead, neatly folded papers gleamed under the light. They carried her late father's signature, stamped with the family seal, showing that every piece of land, every business, every treasure was now hers alone. Her breath caught, and her chest tightened as the reality hit her. The woman Kunnel was trying to impress blinked in shock, not understanding why the attention shifted. Kunnel's confident smirk melted into panic. He stumbled to his feet, unable to look at her or the documents that proved he had nothing. His lips trembled, trying to form words, but the truth was already clear to everyone watching. The whispers turned into gasps, then into laughter at his shame. Alana rose slowly, her eyes never leaving Kunnel's face. She no longer looked weak or broken. She looked like someone who had just discovered her true strength. She closed the velvet box with calm hands and placed it against her chest. Without saying a word, she turned to leave, her steps steady, her head high. Kunnel reached out as if to stop her, but his hands shook and his voice failed. The crowd parted for her like a queen making her exit. The man who had tried to humiliate her now stood small, broken and forgotten. The truth had not just unfolded. It had crushed him that Zikora's husband humiliated her by proposing to her cousin at her own birthday party. The house was decorated with balloons and lights, music played softly, and friends and family gathered to celebrate her special day. She wore a bright smile, trying to enjoy the evening, not knowing what cruel surprise was waiting. Suddenly, her husband stood in the center of the room, holding a velvet box. Everyone assumed he was about to honor his wife with love, but instead, he walked past her and stopped in front of her cousin. Gasps filled the air as he knelt on one knee, his voice loud enough for all to hear, asking another woman to be his forever. The room grew tense, and whispers spread like wildfire. Zikora's hands shook, her heart breaking, but she refused to cry in front of the crowd. At that exact moment, a waiter appeared, holding another small box. No one noticed him until he stepped forward, bowing gently, and placed it carefully in Zikora's hands. Her husband froze, confused, and her cousin's smile faded as the attention shifted away from them. All eyes turned toward Zikora, who opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside, a breathtaking diamond ring sparkled under the glow of the lights, brighter than anything her husband held. A note tucked beneath the ring revealed it was from someone who had admired her in silence, someone who saw her worth when others tried to shame her. The crowd erupted in murmurs, shock and amazement filling every corner of the room. Her husband's proud look collapsed into panic as he realized the scene no longer belonged to him. The cousin, who had been ready to accept the proposal, lowered her head in shame, unable to meet Zikora's eyes. Zikora stood tall, her face glowing with strength, the ring box clutched in her hands as proof that she was valued far beyond the cruelty she had just faced. The music stopped, but the silence was louder than any sound. Friends and relatives moved closer, their support now directed toward Zikora. Her husband tried to speak, but his words stumbled, lost in the weight of the moment. The secret admirer's gift had turned her pain into power, and her humiliation into triumph. She no longer felt broken, but deeply seen and cherished. Without raising her voice, she lifted her chin and walked away from the man who betrayed her, leaving the room buzzing with awe. Her story forever unforgettable. Amara's cheating husband planned a grand proposal to his mistress at a luxury hotel. The hall was filled with flowers, golden lights, and music that made the evening feel like a fairy tale. Guests whispered with excitement, believing they were about to witness a romantic moment. Amara stood quietly among them, invited only to be embarrassed in front of strangers. Her husband wore a proud smile as he held a small box, walking confidently toward the woman he had chosen over his wife. The mistress pretended to be shy, but her eyes glittered with victory, certain she was about to take Amara's place. The air grew heavy, every heartbeat in the room waiting for the dramatic scene to unfold. Just as he knelt down, ready to open the box, a waiter appeared from the side, carrying another velvet box. The timing was so perfect that the crowd thought it was part of the show. But the waiter walked straight to Amara, bowing deeply, and placed the box in her hands. A hush fell over the hall as every eye turned to her. Confused but calm, she slowly lifted the lid. Instead of a ring, inside lay official divorce papers, stamped and sealed, already signed by her husband through the trick of his own business rival. The documents clearly ended their marriage, stripping him of any control over her, and exposing his downfall. Gasps echoed through the room. The mistress's smile disappeared, her hand still frozen midair, waiting for a ring that never came. Amara's husband paled, his confidence melting into panic as he realized the trap had closed around him. The rival who hated him most had already prepared his fall, and Amara was now the one holding the power. She raised her eyes slowly, looking straight at him, no tears on her face, only strength that made the crowd stare in awe. The guests whispered louder, some even laughing at the man who had tried to shame his own wife but instead destroyed himself. The mistress stepped back, embarrassed, no longer proud to be chosen. Amara closed the box with steady hands, her head high, and walked away, leaving him on his knees with nothing. The night he planned to crown himself with glory became the night he lost everything. The lawyer's trap had turned betrayal into justice, and Amara's silence spoke louder than any words. Kikolomo's husband publicly proposed to her sister in front of everyone. The family had gathered for a dinner filled with laughter, music, and good food. It was meant to be a peaceful evening, but it quickly turned into a storm. Kikolomo watched in shock as the man she had trusted stood up, holding a small box in his hand, and instead of turning to her, he walked toward her younger sister. Gasps spread across the room as he bent down on one knee, declaring his love and asking for her hand. The sister covered her mouth, pretending to be surprised, while the guests looked back and forth between the two women, waiting to see Kikolomo's reaction. Her heart broke, but she sat still, her eyes wide, unable to believe such betrayal could happen in her own family. As whispers grew louder, a waiter entered the room carrying another velvet box. His steps were slow and steady, and unlike the others, his direction was clear. He walked past the kneeling man and the blushing sister, stopping right in front of Kikolomo. Everyone turned in silence as he placed the box gently into her hands. Confused, she opened it with trembling fingers, expecting another wound to her pride. But inside were folded documents, sealed with her late father's stamp. They were land deeds signed and confirmed, showing that the entire family estate, every field, every property, now belonged only to her. The room went silent, then filled with shocked whispers. Her husband's proud face turned pale, his mouth opening but no words coming out. The sister's fake smile vanished, replaced by shame as she realized the wealth and power had shifted. Kikolomo, once seen as the one left behind, was suddenly revealed as the true heir, the rightful owner of everything her father had built. She stood slowly, her hands firm as she closed the box. Her eyes met her husband's, then her sister's, but she did not speak. Her silence was heavier than any words. The guests turned their attention to her, no longer pitying her, but admiring the strength in her calmness. Her husband remained on one knee, but now not out of pride, only out of shock, trapped in humiliation. Kikolomo walked away with steady steps, leaving them to drown in their own disgrace. What was meant to destroy her became the moment she rose above them all, carrying not just dignity but power in her hands. Onika was mocked by her husband when he knelt before his secretary to propose. The grand office dinner was filled with music, flashing lights, and business partners eager to watch the night's surprise. She had dressed with care, believing she was there to support him, but instead, she became the target of humiliation. In front of everyone, he held out a velvet box toward his secretary, smiling proudly as if he had achieved the greatest victory. The secretary covered her mouth, pretending to be shy, while the crowd gasped at the boldness of his act. Laughter and whispers filled the room, many staring at Onika, waiting to see how she would react to the cruel betrayal. Before she could even move, a waiter stepped forward, carrying another velvet box. His steps were calm and steady as he walked directly toward Onika. The crowd grew silent, watching in confusion. With respect, he placed the box in her hands. Her husband frowned, unsure of what was happening, while the secretary's smile began to fade. Slowly, Onika opened the box, her hands trembling. Inside were not jewels, but official documents bearing her name. They showed proof that she was the true owner of the company's shares he had been boasting about for years. What he thought was his success actually belonged to her, secured through a secret investment that he never even suspected. Gasps filled the room, and the whispers turned into stunned silence. Business partners leaned closer, shocked at the discovery. Her husband's face turned pale, his confidence shattering in an instant. The secretary stepped back, embarrassed, her hands dropping as her dreams of power slipped away. Onika's eyes lifted, no longer filled with pain but with calm strength. She closed the box gently, holding her head high as the weight of the truth settled on everyone present. The man who had mocked her was now the one trembling, his pride stripped bare before all his partners. No one looked at him with respect anymore. All eyes were on Onika, the woman who had just revealed herself as the true power behind everything. She rose slowly, her step steady, and walked past him without a word. The guests parted, some nodding in admiration, others whispering in awe. What was meant to crush her became the moment she claimed her throne. Her silence was louder than his betrayal, and the night ended with him broken while she stood as the true queen of the empire. That Abiola's husband humiliated her at a royal banquet by proposing to another woman. The grand hall sparkled with golden chandeliers, royal guards stood tall by the walls, and nobles filled the tables with laughter and chatter. The evening was meant to honor tradition, but Abiola's heart sank when her husband suddenly stood up, holding a small velvet box. Instead of turning to his wife, he crossed the hall and knelt before a glamorous woman dressed in bright jewels. Gasps echoed across the banquet as his voice rose, declaring his love and asking for her hand. Whispers spread quickly, some shocked, others eager to watch the drama unfold. Abiola sat frozen, her hands trembling beneath the table, her face pale under the heavy glow of the lights. Just then a waiter appeared, moving slowly through the stunned crowd. In his hands, he carried a velvet box, but his steps were not toward the man kneeling in pride. He walked directly to Abiola and stopped before her. To everyone's surprise, he knelt respectfully and lifted the box toward her like a sacred gift. The hall fell silent, every noble and guard waiting to see what this unexpected moment meant. With hesitant fingers, Abiola opened it, her eyes widening as a magnificent royal ring sparkled inside. A note lay beneath the jewel, bearing the seal of the crown prince himself, declaring it was his gift to her. Shock rippled through the hall like a wave. The woman being proposed to lowered her eyes in shame, realizing she was suddenly invisible. The husband's proud expression collapsed into disbelief, his lips trembling as he stared at the royal seal. He knew this meant his betrayal had been witnessed by the highest power, and he could not undo it. Abiola's heart, once heavy with pain, now rose with new strength. She held the box close, her face glowing not with tears but with dignity. The nobles whispered louder, some smiling, some clapping softly, as they understood what had just happened. The crown prince himself had chosen to honor her, making her humiliation transform into glory. Her husband remained kneeling, but now he looked broken, his arrogance stripped away. Abiola rose slowly, her steps graceful as the room bowed their heads in respect. She no longer looked like a forgotten wife, but like a woman chosen by royalty. The night meant to crush her became the night. She walked out shining brighter than anyone else in the hall. Kayamika's husband invited journalists to cover his proposal to his mistress. The hotel ballroom was glowing with lights, cameras flashed from every corner, and reporters whispered excitedly, waiting to capture the perfect headline. He stood in the center of the hall with a velvet box in his hand, smiling proudly as if he had achieved greatness. Instead of honoring his wife, he called his mistress forward, ready to kneel and humiliate Kayamika in front of the entire press. The crowd gasped as he bent down, and the mistress pretended to blush, her eyes sparkling with victory. Kayamika sat in silence, her heart heavy, but her face remained calm as the betrayal unfolded before everyone. Just as the cameras zoomed closer, a waiter stepped out from the side with another velvet box. His steps were slow but certain as he walked directly toward Kayamika. Confused whispers filled the room as he bowed and placed the box gently into her hands. The journalists turned their cameras, lenses now focused on her instead of the man kneeling. With steady fingers she opened it, and instead of a ring, she found a small USB drive resting inside. The crowd waited, puzzled, until the waiter connected it to the large projector screen at the back of the hall. Suddenly, shocking videos appeared before the entire press. They showed her husband signing illegal deals, exchanging money under the table, and laughing with men involved in corruption. Gasps filled the hall as every dark secret played out on the giant screen. Journalists leaned forward, scribbling notes, capturing photos. Their attention completely shifted away from the proposal. The mistress stepped back in horror, no longer smiling, while her husband's proud expression melted into pure fear. He stood up quickly, trying to defend himself, but his words were drowned out by the proof flashing behind him. Kayamika sat still, her face calm, her strength glowing brighter than any jewel. The crowd no longer saw her as a victim, but as the woman who held the key to exposing the truth. Her husband stumbled, sweat rolling down his forehead, as the press surrounded him with questions. She closed the box and rose to her feet, walking past him with dignity as the cameras followed her instead. The man who wanted the world to see his betrayal had been destroyed by his own secrets. That night, Kayamika walked away not broken, but powerful, while his empire crumbled in front of flashing lights that Ezen's husband proposed to a business partner's daughter. The banquet hall was filled with wealthy investors, golden lights reflected off crystal glasses, and the evening was meant to celebrate success. She sat quietly, smiling politely, unaware of the cruel surprise about to unfold. Suddenly, her husband stood up, his voice echoing through the room as he called the daughter of his powerful partner forward. He pulled out a velvet box and in front of everyone, bent down on one knee. Gasps rose from the guests, whispers spreading like wildfire as they realized he was discarding his own wife to gain more power. The young woman placed her hands on her chest, pretending to be shy, while investors watched with eager eyes. Ezen's heart sank, but she held her tears, sitting frozen while the world around her laughed at her pain. Just then a waiter appeared, holding another velvet box. His steps were calm and firm as he walked straight past the kneeling man, and stopped in front of Ezen. The hall fell silent, every guest turning in shock as the box was placed gently in her hands. Confused but steady, she opened it. Inside, instead of a ring, she found official company transfer papers signed and sealed, bearing her husband's own signature. They clearly declared her as the rightful owner of the empire he thought he controlled. Gasps turned into loud whispers, some guests rising from their seats to get a closer look. Investors exchanged shocked glances, realizing the power had shifted in an instant. Her husband's confident smile faded into horror, his hands shaking as he tried to understand what had happened. The business partner's daughter slowly stepped back, her face red with shame, no longer the center of attention. Ezen lifted her eyes, her expression calm yet strong, the glow of dignity replacing the pain that had filled her heart moments ago. The crowd stared in awe, some clapping softly, others nodding with respect. The man who had hoped to gain power by humiliating her had, without knowing, signed away everything he owned. His betrayal turned into his greatest mistake. Ezen closed the box, stood tall, and walked through the hall like a queen, the guests parting for her with admiration. She left her husband trembling, broken, and forgotten, while she rose as the true leader. That night, she was no longer seen as a wife betrayed, but as the business queen who claimed her throne that Nkem's twin sister was chosen over her at a dinner. The evening was filled with soft music, glowing candles, and family members gathered around the long table. Everyone expected a moment of celebration, but no one guessed it would turn into betrayal. Nkem watched with wide eyes as her husband stood up, his smile confident as he held a velvet box. Instead of turning toward her, he walked to her twin sister, who sat across the table, dressed in a sparkling gown. The room gasped when he bent down on one knee, opening the box toward her. Murmurs spread quickly, some guests shocked, others whispering in disbelief. Her sister pretended to be shy, covering her mouth, while Nkem sat frozen, her chest tightening with pain as humiliation filled her. Just as her husband prepared to speak, a waiter entered the room holding another velvet box. His steps were steady, and without hesitation he walked directly to Kim. Confusion spread among the guests, silence filling the hall as he bowed and placed the box in her hands. She looked at it with trembling fingers, uncertain of what awaited inside. Slowly, she lifted the lid, and instead of jewelry, there were folded papers sealed with her grandmother's mark. Her eyes widened as she read the words that confirmed she was the sole heir to her grandmother's will. Every estate, every property, every treasure had been given to her alone. Gasps echoed around the table, and the whispers grew louder. Her twin's proud smile faded instantly, her hands dropping in shock. The husband's confident expression collapsed, his lips trembling as he realized his plan had turned against him. The guests leaned closer, stunned by the discovery, their pity for Kim changing into admiration. She no longer looked like the sister left behind. She was revealed as the true heir of the family legacy. Kim closed the box gently, her face calm, her eyes strong. She rose from her chair with steady steps, no tears on her face, only quiet dignity. Her husband remained on his knees, humiliated, while her twin sat frozen, her pride destroyed. The crowd turned their attention to Kim, whispering her name with respect. The betrayal that was meant to break her became the moment she stood above them all. That night, she walked away not as the forgotten sister, but as the rightful queen of her family's inheritance. Ayanda's husband humiliated her in a stadium by proposing to his mistress in front of thousands. The crowd was loud, the floodlights shone brightly, and cameras streamed the event live across screens. Ayanda sat among the VIPs, expecting a celebration of the match, but instead, her husband took the microphone. With a wide smile, he called his mistress to the center of the field, holding out a velvet box. The crowd gasped, then cheered, thinking they were witnessing romance. Her heart sank as she watched him kneel before another woman, his betrayal displayed to the world. The mistress pretended to be shy, but her eyes sparkled with pride as the cameras zoomed in on her face. Thousands of eyes stared, and Ayanda sat frozen, pain pressing against her chest as humiliation swallowed her whole. Just then, a waiter in a crisp uniform walked across the stadium field, holding another velvet box. His steps were calm, ignoring the roaring noise around him. He went straight to Ayanda, bowing as he placed the box carefully into her hands. The cameras turned, the crowd's cheers softened into confused murmurs, and all eyes shifted toward her. With trembling fingers, she opened it, expecting another cruel twist. But instead of a ring, there was a folded contract sealed with her father's mark. Her breath caught as she read the words. It was the official document naming her the sole owner of the football team. The stadium erupted, not in cheers for the proposal, but in shock at the truth. Her husband's confident grin vanished, his knees shaking as he stared at the papers that proved he had no control over the very team he bragged about. The mistress lowered her head in shame, her earlier pride gone, as the cameras captured every reaction. Ayanda rose slowly, holding the contract high enough for everyone to see. The crowd gasped louder, then cheered wildly, chanting her name as if she were the true champion of the night. Her husband stumbled, trying to explain, but his words were drowned by the noise of thousands celebrating her power. Ayanda stood tall, her face glowing with strength, her humiliation replaced with triumph. She turned away, walking off the field with dignity, while the cameras followed her every step. The man who tried to shame her was left broken, his dreams crushed in front of the world. That night, she was no longer just a wife, she was the queen of the stadium. Bestias. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Bye.